Thank you, Saru. Thank you, Paul and the technical team. I'm very delighted to welcome you to the Boston Study Group's Ambedkar Lecture Series October month segment. We do this lecture series every month. We have distinguished scholars, guests, activists, artists, journalists who work that we call social justice, who have an angle that has not been exposed, which is caste. We also have the angle of class, question of communalism, forms, the discourse of what we do here at Boston Study Group. Brief intro about BSG. BSG is a group of scholars, intellectuals, organic, professional, desk-type intellectuals, as well as their activists. The Boston Study Group believes in transforming the theory by actively participating in praxis. So we just don't think that we should sit and theorize the issues, but we should take it outside, work out publicly. The issues that have remained unaddressed within the larger discourse of America when it comes to issues of South Asia, the issues that remain marginalized as it remains marginalized in South Asia. Boston Study Group tries to amplify those issues very actively, proactively, and it has been doing this job. We also have one of its flagship events of co-sponsoring an annual conference at Brandeis University that addresses the issues of unfinished legacy of B.R. Ambedkar. Boston Study Group has been active participant for the past 2 years, and it also has actually donated Ambedkar's bust to Brandeis. It's the second university after Columbia to host a bust of Ambedkar in one of its prestigious libraries. In addition to that, Boston Study Group also hosts reading groups, because that's what it is, Boston Study Group. We read various literatures. The literature span from subordinate studies to radical Ambedkar literature, Bahujan literature, feminist literature, queer literature. We try to connect these questions of caste through these various dynamics. And thus, this brings us to today's segment. We have a very distinguished scholar friend, brother in the movement, who has been engaging with this question quite proactively. He has a distinguished career. He's currently at Global University. Global University is in Western UP. And he was telling me it's in the nice scenic foothills of India. And so he was one of the founding faculties there. The institution, Global, sounds very conversant, global, local, and kind of enmeshing the modern modernity with its own foundation. So we are not here to advertise local. We are here to talk of Khalid. So a brief intro of Khalid. Khalid Ansari is a director of Dr. Ambedkar Center for Exclusion Studies and Transformative Action at Global University, India. He works in the field of social and cultural theory and is interested in grassroots organizing. His scholarly interventions to publicize the history of resistance movement and the social and political aspirations of subordinate caste Pasmanda Muslims have received quite a significant attention among South Asian and larger Islamic questions of caste. He was awarded the HIVOS PhD Fellowship for his Pluralism Knowledge Program from 2010 to 2013, and his doctoral work on caste movements among Indian Muslims with the University of Humanistic Studies at Utrecht in Netherlands. He said he's about to submit his PhD thesis, and so we should start calling him Dr. Khalid Ansari. We are very privileged to have you and look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. A very warm good evening to all of you. At the onset, let me thank the Boston Study Group, especially Mr. Sanjay Bhagat, for having me here, and for all the people present for their patience in the face of so many technological glitches. So I'll just start with the presentation. In 1997, the late Suzanne Okin initiated a debate on feminism and multiculturalism in the Boston Review by posing a very specific question: is multiculturalism bad for women? Her object of reflection was the frequent collision between the norm of gender equality and the minority claims of protection of diversity. especially in the context of illiberal cultures. Employing a number of illustrations from the social history of the West, she pointed out how the advocates of minority rights have under-addressed this tension through the logics of monetization of culture on the one hand and invisibilization of the private domestic sphere on the other. In contrast to the proponents of multiculturalism, who saw the cultural unit as the key axis for moral training, self-esteem, and the realization of the good life, Oken was at pains in demonstrating a different story. Mainly, how cultures were also sites of male hegemony and patriarchal practices, and therefore their protection may more often than not work against ensuring dignity, self-esteem, or participation for a vast majority of women. Since Oken's posing of this fundamental question, the debate has grown in its complexity, and the rights of minorities within minorities, or internal minorities, have gained some academic attention. The reason I started with this fragment is because the movement I have been studying in the last few years, the Pasmanda movement, which is a movement of subordinated caste Muslims in northern India, seems to be asking an analogous question in the South Asian context. Is multiculturalism or minority rights frame bad for subordinated caste groups? Muslims usually use the term Zaat or Biradri.
Yeah.
Muslims usually use the term Zaat or Biradri for referring to caste, and the Archaeological Survey of India's Ambitious People of India project informs us that there are about 705 Biradris or occupational groups in the community. However, despite the ubiquitous presence of caste in the community, it is the elephant in the room that no one wishes to talk about. In contrast to other segmentations, for instance on the basis of gender, class, region, language, maslak, caste is particularly seen as a deviation by many Muslims. Largely because caste is hegemonically framed as an institutional norm of the Hindu community, with which the Muslims share an animated history of conflict, arguably accentuated further with the interventions of the colonial knowledge power regimes from the early 19th century onwards. Now, if Islam is conceived as an egalitarian tradition and caste a hierarchical Hindu one, then any presence of caste within Indian Muslims can only be posed as a regrettable variation, either as a residue from the deficient conversion process to Islam from Hindu caste communities in historical time, or the outcome of acculturative influence of Hinduism, which will subsequently be ironed out with increasing Islamization. The point I want to impress upon all of you is that while the initial impetus of Islam is egalitarian, in the sense that the high classical text of Islam ensures equality of all believers in the face of God, in front of God. So it talks about spiritual equality. But as far as social and economic inequality is concerned, we see that the empirical evidence is on the contrary. So let's take the institution of slavery. So despite all the egalitarian impetus, slavery was abolished in Muslim countries in the 1920s after the Morocco Declaration. Immediately after the Prophet's passing away, there were conflicts that started and animated the early history of Islam. The second, third, and fourth caliph, they were murdered. And the expansionist Islam, because the Prophet never waged an offensive war. All the wars which can be termed as expansionist wars, they started after the demise of the Prophet. Right? So, in that sense, there has been a tension between the egalitarian ethos of Islam and the hierarchical structures that Islamic armies and Islamic peoples they came to occupy in later years, especially Iran, which had a very well-built hierarchical structure, and Islam was informed by the hierarchical structure of these different empires. Even when Islam entered India, there were two different routes. One was through the north, northwestern frontier province, which is, again, I see that as an attempt of expansionist Islam to move inwards. So there was coercive power, repressive power of the armies, and also there was soft power of the Sufis, right? So like Althusser says, there are the repressive structures and the ideological state structures. There was another route which was through Kerala, which was obviously the trading route. But again, the Kerala Muslims, the Kerala route it traces its connection directly with Yemen. And Yemen, there was a hierarchical system already there. Even now, there is a small community of untouchables in Yemen, known as the Ekam. Probably, I just don't collect it right now. So this understanding that Muslims converted, the new Muslims, and with the passage of time, Islamization will obliterate caste, Islamization will annihilate caste, it has not happened. Rather, on the contrary, as the sociologist Imtiaz Ahmed informs us, the Islamization process has further strengthened caste by invisibilizing it, by not addressing it. Can I have some water? Right. However, the recent politicization of Muslim caste in North India, in the form of the Pasmanda movement, has indicated at the recalcitrance of the caste question within Islam. Here I would like to outline the conditions of possibility for the availability of caste as a category in conducting Muslim politics and the various discursive ruptures it has activated. Just take it. Politicization of Muslim caste, the two waves. As we know, there is a substantial body of work that has interrogated the Orientalist, colonialist inquiries of caste within the orthodox, heterodox, great tradition, little tradition, tradition, modernity binaries, and has traced the implications of caste with power in historical time. Also, the process of modernization in the post-colonial phase did not result in the anticipated transcendence or annihilation of primordial identities like caste or religion, but rather in their re-articulation as potent categories in the political sphere. Along similar lines, caste as a category for conducting politics was available to the Muslim community from at least the early part of 20th century onwards, when various caste associations that worked as both pressure groups and reformist collectives came to be established. The first wave of Muslim caste politics can be traced back to the formation of the All India Movement Conference in Rohtas, Bihar in 1925, which tried to mobilize the subordinated caste Muslims in order to contest the elite, high caste, Sharif hegemony. The Movement Conference, under the charismatic leadership of Abdul Qayyum Ansari, challenged the communal articulation of Muslim League politics and squarely opposed the separatist project of Pakistan informed by the two-nation theory. However, despite limited success and due to various historical factors, the Movement movement lost steam in the post-independence phase and was co-opted in what Kothari once referred to as the Congress system. The second wave of Muslim caste politics was activated as a consequence of Mandal politics in the 1990s with the formation of the All India Backward Muslim Morcha by Dr. Ijaz Ali in 1994 and the All India Pasmanda Muslim Mahaz by Ali Anwar in 1998 in Bihar. Ali Anwar advanced the first major articulation of Pasmanda politics in his book Masawat Ki Jang, loosely translated as the Battle for Equality. Pasmanda, a Persian term meaning those who have fallen behind, refers to Muslims belonging to the Shudra, that is the backward and Ajlaf, the Ati Shudra, that is the Dalit and Arzals, and Adivasi, that is the indigenous tribal caste. Broadly, the Mahaz enacted the Pasmanda as an oppositional identity to that of the dominant Ashraf Muslims and foregrounded the conflation of the interests of the latter with the politics around Islam and minority rights. The dominant perception is that Islam is an egalitarian religion and that Indian Muslims on the whole, especially in the post-such a scenario, constitute a subaltern community. The Pasmanda counter-discourse takes issues with both these formulations. In terms of theological hermeneutics, Masood Alam Falahi's work, Hindustan Mein Zaat Paat aur Musalman, has persuasively demonstrated how the notion of kufu, that is, the rules about possible marriage relation between groups, were read through the lens of caste by the Manuvadi ulema, and how a parallel system of graded inequality was put into place in South Asian Islam. As far as the social sphere is concerned, Ali Anwar's Masawat has documented caste-based disenfranchisement of Pasmanda Muslims at the hands of self-styled Ashraf leaders in community organizations like madrasas and personal law boards, representative institutions like parliament and state assemblies and departments, state ministries and institutions that claim to work for Muslims, minority affairs, Waqf boards, Urdu academies, AMU, Jamia Millia Islamia, etc. As Akbar Alabadi satirically said earlier, council mein bahut sayyad, masjid mein faqat jumma. The book also underlines stories of humiliation, discrimination, and violence on caste grounds that various Pasmanda communities have to undergo on a daily basis. Various pejorative idioms and jokes are circulated about Pasmanda communities, so much so that the very titles of various communities are often used as curse words. There are also reports which document altercations over inter-caste marriages, burial of lower caste in the community graveyards, and in a few mosques if lower caste try to occupy the front rows during prayers. There is also evidence of social boycott, caste atrocity, or extravagant revenge extracted by higher caste Muslims. Thus, Pasmanda commentators contest the two key elements of mainstream Muslim or minority discourse: Islam as an egalitarian religion, and Indian Muslims on the whole as an oppressed community. Islam may be normatively egalitarian, but actual existing Islam in Indian conditions is deeply hierarchical and patriarchal. Similarly, all Muslims are not oppressed. Muslims are a differentiated community in terms of power with dominant and subordinated Pasmanda sections. Consequently, the so-called minority politics, which has been quite content in raising symbolic and emotional issues so far, Babri, AMU, personal law, Urdu, is really the politics of dominant caste Muslims in the view of Pasmanda commentators. Not surprisingly, a recurrent theme in Pasmanda narratives is that minority politics has singularly failed to address the bread and butter concerns of the Pasmanda Muslims, who constitute about 85% of the Indian Muslim population. I'll just run through a few slides so as to contextualize the discussion. So the first slide was regarding the Moment Conference, and this is Abdul Qayyum Ansari. So he was the foremost leader of the Moment movement. This is Maulana Asim Bihari, another leader of the Moment Conference. This is the second wave that I talked about, which started from 1990s onwards. Ali Anwar Ansari, who formed the All India Pasmanda Muslim Mahas, Dr. Ijaz Ali, All India Backward Muslim Morcha, Shabir Ansari, All India Muslim OBC organization. So Ali Anwar and Ijaz Ali both worked in Bihar, in northern India. Shabir Ansari worked in Maharashtra. Next. These are a few slides how Muslim caste manifests itself. The first is regarding piety. Most of these mosques are caste-based mosques, right? So they were built by lower caste because in historical time, 80 years back, 100 years back, they were not allowed to pray in the front rows. There are stories of scuffle between upper caste and lower caste Muslims for the right to pray, and that is why they created new mosques. So this is the Bhatwa Mosque, which is a mosque of Muslim Bhats, which is our lower caste group. It's in Azamgarh. This is a renovated mosque. Then that is the Natharia Mosque in Azamgarh, that Muslim nuts, the acrobats, right? Another slide. This is the Anwarul room. It's a mosque of Muslim scavengers, halal khor, and no upper caste person prays in this mosque. No upper caste person goes in this mosque, even now, 2017. Dhobiana Mosque, it's in Azamgarh. The mosque was constructed by Muslim dhobis, right? The laundry persons, the washermen. Next. This is a Qabristan, a graveyard. You can see Chamar Qabristan. So this belongs to the Muslim Chamars, right? Chamar, Muslim Chamar. It's a picture from Mau, Eastern UP. Next. This is a person from Galata community, right? So they are also known as Gadhedis in Delhi and around that region, right? Next. This is an interesting comment by Farooq Abdullah. मैं असल में मुसलमान नहीं कश्मीरी पंडित हूँ. So how caste works in the construction of Muslim identity? Okay, he says I'm not a Muslim. I'm not basically a Muslim, but I am a Brahmin. So I was converted from Brahmin to Islam, right? So he still recalls his Brahmin ancestry. So this is a reformist school. It's a Madrasa Islamia Jamtul Quraysh. Quraysh are basically butchers in North India. So these are various reformist interventions by the lower caste community. Next. Violence. Now violence is of two kinds. One is Muslim violence, and then there is Hindu Muslim violence. So this is a Muslim violence. Bihar 2008, where there was a clash between upper caste Muslims and lower caste Muslims in Alapur town, again over a mosque, over the right to pray. I have written a complete piece on that, A Tale of Two Mosques in Himal, South Asia. If anyone is interested, it's available on internet. It can be accessed there. Now this is honor killing, marriage between a lower caste boy and a higher caste Muslim girl. Right? So this boy was killed.
Both are within the Muslim community.
Muslim community. Both are within the Muslim community. And there are a number of such cases in Western UP, which are never really highlighted in the media. This is again Gujarat. Now we are talking about Muslim-Hindu violence. Khalid Ansari is again a Pasmanda. In most of the cases of criminal violence, the major or even lynchings, Najib was a Pasmanda, Akhlaq is a Pasmanda, Pehlu Khan, who's from the Mayo community, he's also a Pasmanda. Most of the people who are lynched in Jharkhand, they are all Pasmanda. Not even a single upper caste Muslim has been lynched in the last few days, after the BJP thing. In riots also, in Muzaffarnagar, all those who were killed are Pasmandas. Now it's not to say that the upper caste persons are not affected, but the point is that the entire issue of criminal violence, it has to be complicated by class, space and other kinds of vulnerability, right? So I'm really sorry, I spoke. So, right. So this, then art. This is Sheikh Kiran Borewala. He's a poet from Andhra. This is a poem which was originally in Telugu, but was translated by my friend Kufi Nalgundwar. Call me Borewala, or call me a Girijan Muslim, call me a Dalit Muslim, or call me any other Muslim. But one thing is certain, if I don't weave a Bora, your janaza won't move. Look at the tone and tenor. From the oppression of the Hindu order and the discrimination in the Mullah order, I am waking up only now. Leaving the inertia and indifference that burned me for decades, I am sounding the Marafa of the Borewalas. So Marafa is kind of a human. Next. This is a novel by Abdullah Bismillah, Jini Jini Vini Chadariya. This is its English translation, The Song of the Loop, which captures the life of Muslim weavers in Eastern UP, in Benares. Gangs of Wasipur was originally a fight between Muslim castes, but it was given a particular spin by the filmmaker. Arvind Shesh has written the original story about Gangs of Wasipur, which is the story of higher caste Pathans and other lower castes in that area. Next. This is Ajmal Kamal. He is from Lahore. He is presently doing a PhD from South Asian University on caste and adab. So Urdu, adab and caste. Representation. Now it's very difficult to really talk about the question of representation because the figures are not available. The last census happened in 1931. Since then, we don't have any authentic caste data, right? So in 2010, 2011, government conducted something similar to a caste census, but the data has not been released yet. So in the absence of data, there has been a persistent demand by the Pasmanda community for the caste data to be revealed, to be released, so that at least we could have some sense where various castes stand. We're not talking about one or two castes, we're talking about 700 caste communities. So, I mean, if we don't have the data, how can we inform the policy measures?
700 within the
Muslims, 700 caste communities. Next. This is the Lok Sabha representation. From 1st to 14th, there were total MPs 7,500. Now, there's always this discussion that Muslims are underrepresented. Pasmanda movement challenges that. So if you look at Muslims, out of 7,500, there have been 400 Muslims. The population of Muslims is 13.4, and their representation would be 5.3. If you just look at the first row, obviously Muslims are underrepresented. But the story doesn't end here. When you dig further, you bring in the category of caste, the story completely changes. Upper caste Muslims were 340 out of 400 Muslims MPs. Their population, upper caste Muslims is 2.01 of India's population. Their representation is 4.5. So you can see they are doubly represented. They are doubly represented, the upper caste Muslims. Now the lower caste Muslims, they return only 60 MPs. Their population is 11.4. The representation is only 0.8. Right. Next. This is the 2012 elections, the distribution of tickets. So if you look at the first column, this is the Samajwadi Party. So Muslims got 83 tickets, upper caste Muslims got 70 out of 83. The population of lower caste Muslims is 85% of Muslim population. You can make out. Backward caste Muslims only got 11. Right? DSP 88, upper caste 58. Backward caste Muslims 11. Similarly for other parties. Even in this election, the recent election, BSP party gave 100 tickets to Muslims. Out of 100 tickets, 87 were upper caste Muslims. 87% are upper caste, while the actual percentage is 50. So that is what is happening in the sphere of representation. Next. Government jobs. Their population is 2.01, the population of Sharif Muslims. Almost in the 6 sectors, they are overrepresented except 2. One is central security agencies, third is SPS. Point. And central security agencies, one can understand the discourse of partition and Muslims as fourth columnists and so on and so forth. But in all the other spheres, they are overrepresented. Next. Okay. Now, ruptures in the minority discourse. In order to mark the ruptures that the Pasmanda narratives are producing, the following extract from the work of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar will be useful. I am quoting from Dr. Ambedkar's Pakistan or the Partition of India. It seems to me that the reason for the absence of the spirit of change in the Indian Musliman is to be sought in the peculiar position he occupies in India. He is placed in a social environment which is predominantly Hindu. It is this consciousness that he has to save himself from being submerged by the Hindus socially and politically, which to my mind is the primary cause why the Indian Muslims, as compared with their fellows outside, are backward in matters of social reform. Their energies are directed to maintaining a constant struggle against the Hindus for seats and posts in which there is no time, no thought and no room for questions relating to social reform. And if there is any, it is all overweight and suppressed by the desire, generated by pressure of communal tension, to close the ranks and offer a united front to the menace of the Hindus and Hinduism by maintaining their socio-religious unity at any cost. Muslim politicians do not recognize secular categories of life as the basis of their politics, because to them it means the weakening of the community in its fight against the Hindus. This remarkable text, written in the 1940s, captures succinctly the main motives relevant to the discussion. Broadly, Ambedkar brings to a sharp relief the question of contending religious nationalisms or competitive communalism, and how the mutual othering of politicized religious communities, the Hindu and the Muslim, has been instrumental in closing all opportunities of social reform within the Muslim community. In other words, Ambedkar burdens the majoritarian Hindu politics for the erosion of secular categories of life within Indian Muslims, and the prime reason why vertical solidarity within Muslims on religious lines has foreclosed all possibilities of horizontal solidarity on the basis of class. and therefore emancipatory politics altogether. I would contend that this particular conceptual matrix, where categories like community, secularism, communalism, majority, minority, solidarity, and reform are arranged within the assumption of religious identity as being the overarching organizing principle, are being discursively destabilized by the narratives circulated by the Pasmanda movement. Let me illustrate this by 5 key moves made by the Pasmanda ideologues. Firstly, there is an attempt to transcend the trap of competitive religious nationalisms by enacting a new social identity, the Pasmanda, and deconstructing the hegemonic nature of the majority-minority dichotomy by revealing that both sides of the binary are dominated by the higher castes. The Pasmanda political subject is thus framed as the victim of both majoritarian and minoritarian politics and located outside the majority-minority dichotomy. As the poet saint from Varanasi and an ancestor of the Pasmandas, Kabir said, "Chalti chakki dekhkar diya kabira roye, do patan ke beech mein sabut bacha na koye." Looking at the grinding stones, Kabir laments, "In the duel of wheels, nothing stays intact." Ali Anwar articulates this through interesting symbolic inversions. हम शूद्र हैं शूद्र, भारत के मूल निवासी, बाद में मुसलमान. We are Shudras first, we are the indigenous peoples of India, we are Muslims later. Again, another Ali Anwar quote. Now the time is right for Pasmanda Muslims to craft their own identity. The identity of Pasmanda Muslims was hitherto obscured in the name of minority. Now we fear the word minority and feel that it is a fake word, chaliya. In the name of minority, either someone terrorizes us, that is the Hindu community, or someone snatches away our rights, that is the Muslim community. In real terms, we are the majority, the Bahujan in this country. Secondly, the secular communal diet is also challenged. While secular politics is embraced as a desirable norm, there is also a realization that the actually existing secular politics is dominated by powerful caste groups. The inaugural issue of Mahaz's journal, Pasmanda Awaz, proclaims, "Secularism is not only our motto, but rather it is an article of faith for us." However, this initial enthusiasm subsides in other writings. Now, to keep on reiterating secularism day in and day out won't do. One will also have to be democratic. Some people only know how to get our votes. Now, they will also have to learn to give us votes. In fact, there is a stress on symbiotic relationship between majority and minority communalism, and the Pasmanda movement proposes to contest minoritarian fundamentalism from within in order to wage a decisive battle against majoritarian fundamentalism at the national level. As Waqar Hawari, a Pasmanda activist, says, while Muslim politicians like Imam Bukhari, etc., add the jodan, that is the starter yogurt, it is left to the Hindu fundamentalists to prepare the yogurt of communism. Both of them are responsible. We oppose the politics of both Hindu and Muslim finishly. There is also a realization that in most instances of communal or Islamophobic violence, it is the Pasmanda Muslims who mostly bear the brunt. Are you with me? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I'll just digress a moment and would like to critique the left's position in India as of now. So the left has been siding with the Muslim right wing and saying that the Muslim right wing and Hindu right wing cannot be equated, right? Because the Muslim right wing will never be in a position to take state power. What the Pasmanda movement is critiquing is that, all right, Muslim right wing cannot take state power. The equivalence cannot be established because the Hindu right is, of course, more powerful than the Muslim right. But it is not a question of equivalence, it is a question of symbiosis. The Muslim right wing lends the vocabulary, it creates the vocabulary that strengthens the Hindu right wing in India. Number one. Number two, if the left supports the Muslim right wing, then the position of Muslim right wing is legitimized within the community and therefore obliterates the space of emancipatory politics within the community itself. Right? So that is where the Pasmanda movement is trying to critique the existing left politics as well. Thirdly, so there is also a realization that in most instances of communal or Islamophobic violence, it is the Pasmanda Muslims who mostly bear the brunt. Right? We have already discussed that before. Thirdly, there is an attempt to parochialize faith-based vertical social solidarities in favor of horizontal solidarities of caste groups across religions, based on a shared history of misrecognition, indignity, and humiliation. The Pasmanda notion of solidarity is captured succinctly by the slogan, Dalit Pichhda Ek Saman, Hindu ho ya Musalman. All Dalit backwards are alike, whether they be Hindu or Muslim. Also, as Ali Anwar suggests, there is a bond of pain between Pasmanda Dalit Muslims and the Pasmanda Dalit sections of other religions. This bond of pain is the supreme bond. We face the same issues, that is why we have to shake hands with the Dalit and Pasmanda sections of other religions. Apart from the desired solidarity of disenfranchised caste across religions, there is an attempt at intersectionality. And the practitioners of Pasmanda movement have also tried to reach out to gender movements within Indian Islam. The entangled nature of caste, gender, and faith emerges quite clearly in the various entries in Pasmanda literature. In Masabat, the author dedicates an entire chapter, Pyar Nikah par Zaat ki Pehredari, caste surveillance on love marriage, that foregrounds the issues of caste patriarchy, honor, and surveillance through various reports cases of tensions around love marriages within the Muslim community. The Pasmanda Awaz has raised questions related to dowry, the condition of Pasmanda women in India, and the gulf between the theory and practice of Muslim representative bodies such as the All India Muslim Personal Law Board on the issues of Muslim women. It is interesting that one of the co-translators of Ali Anwar's Masabat Ki Jang is Zakia Johar, who also helped found the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan. Fourthly, there is a stress on intra-group inequality in comparison to inter-group inequality. The artisanal and working class background of most Pasmanda Muslims has resulted in their engaging with issues of social justice and equity as reflected in the debates on positive discrimination at one level and redistributive schemes on the other. The Mandal Commission report, by listing 82 Muslim lower caste groups as backward, unleashed the long suppressed debate whether reservation should be articulated on the lines of religion or caste among Indian Muslims. Those arguing the former, mostly upper caste Muslims, underlined the egalitarian ethic of Islam and dubbed caste-based reservations to be divisive and disruptive of the unity of Muslims as a community. They argued for reservations for Muslims as a whole or total Muslim reservations as it came to be labelled in Pasmanda political discourse. Those arguing the latter, mostly lower caste Muslims, highlighted that the social reality of Indian Muslims was caste informed and reservations should legitimately be on the basis of caste. They argued that total Muslim reservations was a ploy of the advanced Ashraf section to corner the benefits of reservations. They moreover called it a communal quota and highlighted the dangers of religious polarization that it may result in. And lastly, there is a realization in the community that the community cannot be reformed unless the caste issue is addressed. As Ali Anwar points out, the false pride about there being no discrimination in the Muslim society on the grounds of caste and there being no untouchability prevented efforts at the religious and non-governmental level with respect to social reform or Islam, Muashra. I will now move to the concluding section. Please stay with me for another 5 minutes. The attempt by the subordinated Muslim caste to enact a new identity, and let me run these slides first. So this is the first was the book Masabat Ki Jang by Anwar. This is the book by Masood Alam Falahi, Zaat Patar Musliman, where he documents 1,000 years of history of fatwas, how the fatwas by major Muslim theologians were casteist.
Wow.
This is the movement journal, Pasmanda Awaz. Next. This Pasmanda Kranti again, you can see Baba Kabir's picture here. That is another magazine, Pasmanda Pehel. Next. This is the team of Pasmanda Pehel. Right? You can look at the figures there, the inspirations at the backdrop. That's huge. So that is, there is Bhagat Singh, there is Marx, there is Phule, there is Ambedkar.
Who is next to
That Iqbal Ansari.
Phule, next to Phule?
Next to Pule
the
is Babu Jagjeevan Prasad. He was murdered. He was called the Lenin of Bihar. So, next. These are the various posters. Next. Protest. Next. Next. This is Dalit Muslim Halal Court Samaj. Next. Scavengers. Poster again. Next. This is Dilip Kumar. Dilip Kumar was a great supporter of the Pasmanda movement, especially in Maharashtra. Next. Again, Dilip Kumar is sitting there. It's a program by All India Ghanchi Federation. Again, a Muslim broadcast. Dilip Kumar
Is it the same as the Gujarati Ghanchi, which Modi comes from?
I'm not sure. Next. We have discussed these. Next. Right. We have discussed this. So, I'll move to the conclusion. The attempt by the subordinated Muslim caste to enact a new identity and thereby qualify the mainstream Muslim minority identity may be grasped as an instance of what Connolly dubs as the bumpy politics of becoming, by which new movements jostle and disturb an established pattern of diversity as they seek a place on a modified register of legitimacy and justice. From the vantage point of the Pasmanda experience, the majority-minority or secularism-communism framework has neither been able to contain interreligious violence nor ensure justice to vast majority of marginalized castes. Once the caste principle is employed, the distinction of majority-minority, informed primarily by religion, cracks. And what emerges is a minority of dominant elite, dominant caste elite across religions, lording over the majority of suppressed caste across religions. Since caste movements are decentering entrenched categories which work for the interests of caste elite, the persistence of communal violence and fundamentalist trajectories in faith traditions may also be interpreted as restorative violence to arrest the democratic assertion of socially excluded caste groups. If such is the case, and some recent evidence points out at the large-scale casualties of mostly Pasmanda Muslims in riots and other forms of Islamophobic violence, then we may have underplayed the role of Muslim caste as a factor in interreligious violence as well. From the emerging evidence, there are indications that the politics arranged around the category minority has resulted in the gross underrepresentation of Pasmanda Muslims in power on the one hand and overrepresentation in catalogues of riot victims on the other. However, while the deepening of democracy has clearly interrogated the mainstream Muslim minority discourse in India, it resonates with the experience elsewhere as well. Dora Wilkinson, speaking from an Afro-American perspective, asks for a systematic questioning of ingrained seductive words and value-based constructions like minority, and radically suggests that researchers, clinicians, and teachers must seek ways to incorporate race and ethnicity in all relevant contexts and omit entirely the minority concept. Arguing from the vantage point of the post-colonial South African experience, Jean Comroff and John Comroff take cognizance of the hyper-politicization and fragmentation of identities and suggest that the term multiculturalism is insufficient to describe the fractious heterogeneity of post-colonies. They propose the term ideology and polyculturalism as post-colonial substitutes for the terms ideology and multiculturalism. While ideology refers to the quest for a collective good and sometimes goods sanctioned by and in the name of a shared identity, the prefix spelled poly in polyculturalism marks two things at once: plurality and its politicization. Most commentators in India, however, have opted for a deliberative consensus within the community as a way out. Partha Chatterjee, for instance, is one of the key exponents of the reforms from within approach and advances a strategic politics of location, strategic politics of toleration, which works on the principle that if the struggle is for progressive change, in social practices sanctioned by religion, then that struggle must be launched and won within the religious communities themselves. I see this entire discussion of internal reform as a closure, primarily because the extant minority space may not be rendering justice to the sheer scale and radical diversity of new identifications and spaces of social transformation in India. We are not talking about one caste, we are talking about 700 castes and 4,000 castes in the Hindu community. For instance, in the case of caste, while its politicization has been much discussed, the recent evidence suggests its increasing culturalization as well. More and more subordinated caste units across religions are now developing their own mythologies of origin, replacing symbolisms of humiliation with pride, tracing their own heroes' icons and reconfiguring community norms and practices. Here, caste is reinvented as a cherished identity. Indeed, a community in its own right, with all its implied holistic meanings, and ceases to be a marker that in the main implied injury. So, Puttar Chamarata, and the pride that we see among Maharashtra Dalits, so that is what I am indicating. As stated earlier, Muslims have about 705 caste-based groups, which are increasingly undergoing the process of both politicization and culturalization. Is the minority space capable enough of accommodating the symbolic and material aspirations of such a large number of groups? Is a single window transaction around religion the best way to address the emerging concerns around cultural difference? Is there a need to rethink the dominant consensus on religion as difference and caste as inequality in the face of emerging counter-evidence? One is tempted to say that the minority category probably invisibilizes more than it reveals. As far as the modes of misrecognition and systematic exclusion are concerned, since the demographic question is central to minority politics and Pasmanda define themselves as a majority within minority, one feels that the terms minority within minority or internal minority may not be adequate in capturing the Pasmanda experience of injury and disadvantage. I therefore suggest that the extent social and political conditions that circumscribe the democratic aspirations of Pasmanda Muslims have probably exceeded the context that legitimated the early imagination of the minority space. And therefore, the ensemble of emerging contestations around recognition, social justice, majority, minority, and secular communal duopolies or reform may be provisionally termed as post-minority. The term post-minority also differs from the conservative valence and accommodation of the emancipatory subject that the term minorities within minorities implies, and provides the creative opening for the reconfiguration of the constitutive conceptual violence of the nation state. It does not necessarily mean the out-and-out negation of earlier concerns around religious communalism or majoritarian assimilationism that quintessentially define the minority space, but rather an appreciation for the dynamic nature of social space and democratic possibilities opened by recent normative symbolic inversions inaugurated by subaltern movements like the Pasmanda South Asia. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, excellent presentation, Brother Khalid. We have been enlightened. We barely had a presentation of this sort, energetic, vibrant, and more importantly, debasing some of our structured thinkings. And it has made us, informed in a larger context where it brings the questions of culturalism. Actually, I think that is a very important intervention to the political discourse of Pasmanda. I will exploit my position to launch a few questions in advance and also have commentaries on one sort. Just to quickly address, Pasmanda is a category because you mentioned about this genealogy, the etymology of Pasmanda, which kind of comes from the Parsi. So Pasmanda, is it referring to the Shudra, Ati Shudras, or is it referring to only Ati Shudras?
It is referring to Shudra, Ati Shudra, and Adivasis.
So it's kind of a Bahujan.
It's a parallel of Bahujan.
And who are the Dalits of that Pasmanda? What is it called?
The Hindu Dalits who converted to Islam.
No, how do you identify them? What is the?
I mean, It's the same
So
occupation.
what is the name like
For example, the Mehtar, the Valmikis, they would become Lal Bekis, Muslim, the halal growers, the Hindu scavengers. The weavers in North India are Koris. When they convert to Islam, they become Muslim Julahas.
right?
And caste works through the principle of endogamy. So even if you move from Hindu caste to a Muslim caste, you still practice endogamy. You just create a new caste within a new religion.
Right.
So it moves through endogamy.
And what is he is the Shudra, the Ali Ansari?
Ali Anwar is a OBC Muslim.
Acha.
He comes from the weaver caste, which is known as Julaha, and the Ashrafai's name is Ansari.
Yeah.
So I also come from the same caste group. Dr. Ejaz Ali is from the Rain caste, which is a caste of vegetable growers and sellers. Right?
Kurmi
So,
equivalent.
Kurmis, equivalent of Kurmis,
Yeah.
that's right. Shabbir Ansari, obviously, from the Julaha.
So it's OBC of the Ansari.
Again, it is complicated.
Yeah.
Like caste is everywhere.
Right.
So in some states, the weavers are OBCs. In some states, they are Dalits.
Right.
Julahas in UP would be Dalits. Whenever 1950 presidential order is gone, Julaha in Bihar would be OBCs. Julaha in Punjab would be Dalits, and so on and so forth.
So, I think you're talking about the official category. Are you talking about like what is the caste structure, where they are placed in the caste hierarchy? Is that the question?
Yeah, because what I'm trying to understand within the Pasmanda discourse, who are leading in the sense of who's
The
creating the
OBCs,
discourse?
the OBCs,
The OBCs.
obviously.
And the Dalits of
They are nowhere in the game right now, and that is what the problem is. As far as there is first past the post-political system, even in Hindu Dalits, so-called, there are only a few castes which are leading, isn't it? And that is what will happen with the Pasmanda movement also. Only a few castes like the Ansaris, the Qurayshis, the Rains, the Safis, and the Mansuris. These 5 castes will take the lead, right? But what about the other castes?
How many Dalits are there within? That's what I was curious about. How much percentage perhaps of that Pasmanda do they constitute?
Again, we don't have authentic data, but we can only speculate.
Yeah.
We can only speculate. It will not be less than the Dalits in Hindu community.
It may be the same proportion as what we are having in the
Yes,
Hindu
yes.
Dalit
It
caste.
will not be less than
Around
that.
the
It would be 15%, around 15%.
Okay, and so we don't have any, as of yet any credible leadership from the Dalit Muslims.
No, there are voices, but no
The leadership is
yes,
not
yes.
I think this is a very interesting dynamic for us to understand when it comes to the politics of post-Mandal, and I think the second
Absolutely.
wave, as you have
Absolutely.
defined.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to the question, of the minority of minority, for me, if it's a minority, it is benefiting the majority. The whole discourse, the dichotomy, if the moment you label it, and I think this goes back to Ambedkar's early intervention, one of the first interventions he did to South Borough Commission, and there where he emphasized the importance of minority politics, where he claimed the minorityness for this, and then eventually kind of went through this process. But I was thinking, we were talking about the Pasmanda Muslims, among them the Dalit Muslims, who are again invisible in our discourse. And my question,
Adivasis are more into it.
Adivasis are more. And how about the women who belong to this? So when we talk about the most marginalized currently in India is a Dalit Hindu woman, because she's. But these categories within the Muslim, they add another few layers to that kind of invisibility and horrific discrimination. So my question, rather two commentaries. One is, how do you look at this Pasmanda discourse taking place within the diaspora? Because within the Muslims diaspora, especially the experience of Africa in that, just to give an anecdote.
The diaspora is currently fighting Islamophobia everywhere.
But also the way the diaspora comes from, who are
Absolutely. They are mostly the elite.
Yes.
The diaspora anywhere, even the Dalit diaspora.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Who hegemonizes the Dalit space here? Let me be very clear on that. It would be the Mahar Dalit, isn't it?
Yeah. So when we think about this question of fighting a certain ideology, in South Africa I was interviewing and I wrote that in one of the papers. This Muslims, when I was questioning about the existence of caste, the older generation was like, we don't practice that. I even questioned Kathy Ahmed Katrada, the comrade of Nelson Mandela, and he said, don't bring caste problems here, which I wrote that by the way in the paper, and then he had to intervene. And then younger generation who is more informed about the culturism, the culturalization, the process of multiple identities, they refused. They say there is caste, and it works in a very subtle way. And the way it works is they have the new formulations of gown system. Meaning if you want to marry,
Yeah, that's where it comes in.
you have to, so this is this situation where this Muslim family and this kind of homogeneous identity, right,
Yeah.
within the minority discourse, they went to Gujarat. 4 generations settled in South Africa, they went to Gujarat. And then that specific village to find, and this friend, this journalist, was writing a story about her suffering, from a feminist discourse. So within the diaspora, and I'm talking about the diaspora that is emigrated for maybe 50, 60, 100 years, maybe there is a possibility for us to engage more as to what they come out of it. My second question would be, when we approach this question, of course also the Dalit Muslim and the Dalit Hindu, and then the kind of Bahujan, embrace, we see that is again challenging the minority question, because as you say, they are saying we are 85%, right? Politically speaking, there is a vacuum there, because how can you claim, this? Because I spoke to elite Muslim leaders, even Salman Khurshid, for that matter, he was at this Bangalore conference, and but they were almost, very evasive, and and I have the similar experience. The Hindus, the Muslims who are elites, they treat the Hindu Dalits as Dalits. They don't even invite them. This is experience. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about my Muslim friends, and I can know their social ranking because they were also not invited into their houses. And by the way, the last name was also Ansari, who refused to host this other Muslim. So I was wondering, how does this politics of OBC?
No, if we look at Dr. Ambedkar's conceptualization, he's very clear that India is a system of graded inequality. Right? So there is not only upper caste and lower caste, even within lower caste, there is graded inequality. And there is endogamy. So the Ansaris would marry Ansaris, the Mansuris would marry Mansuris, the Qurayshis would preferably marry Qurayshis. So everyone is by default casteist in India. It is only that the benefits of the caste system, they accrue differentially. So those at the top, they get the highest benefits, and so on and so forth. Right? So it is what I am saying. We are not saying that the lower caste Muslims are not casteist or they are not patriarchal. They are part of the caste system, right? And those counter logics to the caste system, which Dr. Ambedkar imagined in the Annihilation of Caste project, that has to be activated. Now, Dalits and Pasmandas, if they are to be meaningful political categories, they must be a vanishing category. They cannot become robust categories just like Muslims, Christians, or Hindus. There is a particular task for the category Dalit or Pasmanda, and once that task is done, these categories should vanish. Because our project is to emancipate people from the caste system, to annihilate caste. Now, if Dalit or Pasmanda becomes another substantive category, like the religious category, then there is a problem, which is what I am saying through the frame of culturalization. In most Muslim communities, lower caste, there is a process of Ashrafization going on. In most Hindu communities, there is a process of Sanskritization going on, right? So even the many Dalits, for example, in Maharashtra, the argument is that we did well because we converted out of Hinduism to Buddhism, right? Now, what do you say about the Yadavs, who did not convert but even then did well, right? Isn't it? So this entire notion of religion being a liberative force, I think that needs to be re-looked at.
So, sorry, we'll open up the questions, but please introduce yourself, and then you want to take together, or just you give
One on one.
Okay.
Please speak loudly so that we can capture this question also.
Yes.
Or
Yeah, go for
Professor,
it.
if you can repeat the question, that would be really good because
The question has to become.
correct. Means when
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Aniket Dey, I'm a PhD student in history. Thank you for an excellent presentation. It was revealing. I have two questions.
Yes.
I'll go quickly. One is, what was Ambedkar's actual political position with the Pasmanda community, given that he is winning with League support from Bengal, where of course the Ashraf dynamic is slightly different. I mean, the Ashrafs are not as powerful. There is a Krishak, there is a farmer, peasant minister and all that. But still, I mean, there's a tension between the high caste League and the Muslims, whereas Ambedkar is winning into the assembly from League support. So what exactly is his political position there in the 40s? That's one. Secondly, I'm wondering if the culturalization and politicization dichotomy is analytically ultimately very fruitful. Because culturalization, the way you're framing it, is a political statement in its own right. You know, framing that dichotomy goes a different route. It means culturalization is you're explaining away things by culture. You know, that's what Muslims do, and that's culture, and that's a very old American anthropology way of describing it, and that's not what you mean.
That is not what I'm
So that's why I think the dichotomy may be misleading for certain academic audiences, and I just wanted to think about
No. One, Dr. Ambedkar's position, again, if you look at the Pakistan or partition of India, so the first text, it was published in 1940s, right? Dr. Ambedkar in that particular text acknowledges the caste question within Muslims, but then almost says that since the Muslims are ready to claim themselves as a nation, so we must accept the Pakistan demand. So in the 1940s text, Dr. Ambedkar supports the partition in unequivocal terms, with a great emphasis. Even when acknowledging the caste question, there are 4 or 5 pages where he devotes to Muslim caste, drawn from the census reports. Right? When the book was republished in 1946, Pakistan or the partition of India, Dr. Ambedkar adds one more chapter to that book. And now his confidence on the Pakistan movement looks like it is shaken. But still, due to various strategic reasons, I use the term strategic reasons, I won't go into the details here. Various strategic reasons, he still continues to support Pakistan. There is one short text in the collected works in 1952 or 1953, where he claims that he was the theorist of Pakistan. When 3 million people have died, right? 3 million people have died because of the partition. There's one text in 1952, 1953. He claims that he was the chief theorist of Pakistan. Right. Now these are the various interventions. I won't say what his exact position was, but his position broadly could be looked as a critical position. Overall, he was with the partition. He supported a separate nation state for Muslims. Broadly, with all the critical insights that he could have offered, right? He also says why partition will not be fruitful. He also says that, right? And even then he says, since Muslims want that, let's go with it. They are a nation. Let them decide. So right to self-determination, I think that is the route that he probably takes. Culturalization and politicization, right? I'm using in a particular sense, where culturalization is working against the annihilation of caste project. So in the context of annihilation of caste, one has to move beyond caste, and the fundamental premise for moving beyond caste is breaking endogamy. It is desire, it is love, it is sexuality that will actually break the caste system. So unless you free desire, the caste system will not break. And culturalization actually encloses the caste unit within endogamy. So if you become from Kori, you turn into a Muslim Julaha, then you keep on marrying within Muslim Julahas. You are still an endogamous unit, a Muslim endogamous unit, but an endogamous unit nevertheless. If you become convert from Mahar to a Buddhist Mahar, you still continue to marry within Mahar Buddhist. You become just a separate endogamous unit. So that is what I am saying. In the last few years, there has been a trend within lower caste to develop their own mythologies of origin. Some feel that they are Kshatriyas. In Muslims, they feel they have come, for example, the Ansaris. They were basically weavers. After the 1880s, when the first census started, they started saying that we were Ansaris. And then they manufactured a story that they had some connection to Hazrat Ayyub Ansari in Medina, where the camel, the she camel, where it stopped. So there's an entire story. But this is a manufactured narrative. There is no historical origin to that. And all the lower caste, whether Hindus, whether Muslims, they have manufactured. This is what Ashrafization is. If you have to gain self-respect, you have to move within the domain of religion. You have to imitate the upper caste. If the upper caste speak Urdu, you also speak Urdu. If they wear sherwani, you also wear sherwani. If they eat a particular kind of cuisine, you also imitate that. That is what Ashrafization is. If they say that they are Islamic, we have to be more Islamic than them. If they kill people, we must kill more people. Isn't it? So that is what Ashrafization is. So it is holier than thou, holier than the king. That is the kind of syndrome. Right? So when I say culturalization, it is the reconfiguration of caste as holistic, closed communities with a new mythology, with a new story of origin in that sense. And my sense is that culturalization is taking away from the annihilation of caste project. Because to the annihilation of caste project, it is the breaking of endogamy which is central.
Similar sort of things we can see also. My name is Jaspal, amongst the Sikh religion as well.
Yeah.
Same kind of category, same kind of religion. What is interesting, just within 200 years, Jats who were considered Shudras, because they have gained political power, they have become the rulers of Punjab now, whether in West Punjab, or in East Punjab. So it doesn't matter, like that. So that is very interesting. Even though they have political power, yet they haven't broken through the caste, and their relations are endogamic and all that carries on. And, Sikh project, which was very revolutionary and which hit at the, foundation of caste system, now a situation where, you have separate gurdwaras for the, different castes.
Also the emergence of deras.
They are, yeah.
The emergence of deras is actually a critique on the existing
Yeah.
Sikh spiritual institutions, religious institutions. It's a commentary on that.
So, I see so much overlap in parallel.
It's happening everywhere.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
Christians.
Yeah.
The Syrian Saraswat Christians and then the
Oh, yeah,
Roman
yeah.
Catholics. And then
Yeah, amongst
So it's a South Asian thing.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Pakistan. Rahman Malik, who was defense minister,
Yeah.
such a power. He was, made fun of. Hey, Hajjam ka beta.
Ah,
So that is the kind of public discourse.
Me?
Yes.
So this is a question I asked Suraj yesterday, and I want to know the answer from a Pasmanda perspective. So of course, we want annihilation of caste, right? And look like from Hindu Dalit perspective, it is definitely stepping away from religion. So from Pasmanda Muslim perspective, what will be the role of Islam in that process of annihilation of caste?
Yeah, I mean, one, there is no monolithic Pasmanda voice, right? There are many voices. So I think it will be decided by the people themselves. Some would prefer rereading Islam from the perspective of mind life. For example, the liberation theology, those kinds of things. Some could prefer moving away from it and being informed through multi-religious perspectives, right? Some would go to the Shramana traditions of Kabir.
Yeah.
That could be one route, right? So there are so many routes available, and it will depend on what the people decide. It's an open question altogether. The fundamental thing, people are fighting for justice. They are fighting against indignities. They are fighting against the story of dispossession. Those are the fundamental things. What kind of interventions or logics that the movement acquires in the future, I think that's an open question. There is already tension on those counts within the community. So various people will have different subjectivities. So I don't think there is a definite answer to that.
Yes. Just is first. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I had like two parts of. You spoke about gender within the caste fold, and that's relevant in every fold
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
see. I want to know a little bit more about like how Dalit women are facing state violence as well as like domestic violence, which is within their own community, but also state violence. Do you see a similar thing in Pasmanda Muslim women? One. Second, I'm just like this whole thing about endogamy and breaking away from caste through breaking endogamy. I'm completely with it. I agree completely with that. But again, this whole thing about patriarchy in India, like when you get married, the caste which your husband is from is taken in by you. So then it reinforces the same caste system. So like I want you to reflect on these two things, and this is just like this is something I'm struggling with.
No, everyone is struggling with
Yeah.
it.
Khalid, why don't you repeat when you saying so that the audience is recording? But just like when you are answering,
Okay.
you just amplify what just said in a summary.
Okay, I mean, the first question regarding patriarchy, you are saying that is there a similar notion of patriarchy as found in Dalits, in Pasmandas?
Yeah, like do you see state violence on Pasmanda Muslim women similar to what we see on Dalit women?
Again, it would be differential. I mean, violence against women cuts across caste and religion in India. So even the higher caste, there is Brahminical patriarchy, there would be Dalit patriarchy, there would be Pasmanda patriarchy, and so on and so forth. So all women are victims of patriarchy in a differential. Obviously, most upper caste women will not be victims of communal riots, right? Or atrocities, caste atrocities. But they could be a victim of wife battering and so on and so forth, right? So I think it plays within Pasmanda communities as well. Patriarchy plays a role within Pasmanda communities as well. Your second question, I lost track of that. What was
about
your
endogamy,
endogamy?
endogamy and whether endogamy is actually like if you break endogamy,
Yeah.
you take up the caste of whom you're married to, especially for women.
Yeah.
So whether it actually breaks that cycle or not.
It depends on the subjective. I mean, if you're entering into a relationship and you're bringing in caste, obviously within a structure of caste that will reproduce. But that is what the analyzation of caste project is. The people should, there should be spaces for people to marry beyond their caste, beyond their religion, and be accepted in the society. Right?
No,
Once that keeps on happening.
Yeah. No, my question was like, even if they are accepted in the society, it would still be that the woman who's married would take on the caste of her husband, because that's how patriarchy plays in India.
But
right?
that should be contested. It should be contested. I mean, the woman should contest that. I will not take the identity of my husband. I have my own identity. I'm a free human being just like you. So there must be a contest from the woman, isn't it? And if there is any state, if there is a problem with the state forms and state classification, then that must also be challenged. If, for example, if you go to get your son admitted in the school, and so if the entries are biased against the woman, then those need to be challenged.
Arif?
Two things like we found very interesting. I mean, I come from Bihar, so I'm very familiar with both these organizations. But the numbers kind of surprising. We don't have exact numbers, but the 15% what we talk about in terms of Ashraf Muslims, almost exact similar to what we in Bihar call Burabal. The number.
Yeah.
So what is that like when we had this conversion to Islam? The proportion were like exactly the same, so they got placed in the same category. And the second thing is like as we see in Dalit movements in India, there is a one strand which actually was taken by Ambedkar as well, the rejection of Hinduism, because that's the kind of the religion or the faith system of our oppressors. So we reject it and reject everything else. Has there been any such movement within Islam? Because in terms of repression and discrimination, they are very similar, same kind of. But has there ever in India that strand, or South Asia, that strand has come to rejection of Islam?
Two things. I mean, I would like to reflect on that. I don't have easy answers. On numbers, 85% is an underestimate. Sayyid Shabli says 90% of Muslims are lower caste. The late Sayyid Shabli. As does that statistician, Abu Salih Sharif. Right. So 85% is an because due to partition, the Ashraf Muslims, the migration of Ashraf Muslims were higher when compared to the lower caste Muslims.
And also in southern India,
Yeah.
definitely more lower caste Muslims.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yes. So on that count, on numbers, I think that would be my speculation. On the second question, around faith, right? Now there are two trajectories that are happening. Even Dr. Ambedkar, when he announced in 1934 that I was born a Hindu but I will not die a Hindu during the Yola conference, he took so much time to really rethink on religion, and he actually converted in 1956. It was a long journey. And if we go by the historical record and all conversations, he was still playing within Hinduism to see if there could be some liberatory practice possible within the Upanishads, or can we reread the Hindu text to, but somehow that did not happen, or probably he lost hope. And then he converted to Hinduism, to Buddhism, right? I see two trajectories. One, Hinduism is also being redefined right now because of the Dalit challenge. And the right-wing Hinduism, for example, in US, there was a recent lecture by Professor Rambajan, Hindu Liberation Theology, where Cornel West, he introduced the speaker. It's on YouTube. So this is some person from Trinidad who's working on Hindu Liberation Theology. In India, Swami Agnivesh, he is also a Hindu Liberation Theology. For example, Lohia said that we should do a Ramayana Mila, and Ramayana should be interpreted not as a victory of Ram, but as the tragedy of Sita. Right? So one, there are trajectories of redefinition, rethinking, retheorizing Hinduism as well. Right? Even when Ambedkar was against it, and he opted for convergence as a strategic way out of Hinduism. But let us go with the empirical reality. In the last 65 years, how many lower caste so-called Hindus have actually converted in terms of numbers? What about those Muslims, those Sikhs, those Christians who converted in historical time? Why are they still struggling with caste? If conversion is the right methodology to move out of caste, and I'm not denying that, I'm just saying let us rethink. Then why would the Pasmanda movement originate in the first place? If conversion would have taken care of caste, if it would have annihilated caste, there would have been no reason why the lower caste Sikhs, lower caste Muslims, lower caste Christians would be organizing in terms of caste. Right? So, I won't answer in the yes or no. I'm saying religion is one of the most complicated turfs. Religion is one of the most complicated turfs, and Dr. Ambedkar, right till the end, was thinking about it. He was struggling with it. He reached a particular answer in a particular context, which may work for a few people, it may not work for others. So let us not see conversion as a blanket option, but take it critically in a spirit of inquiry and interrogation.
Right.
Yes.
You mentioned at one point the conceptual violence of the nation state, and it seems like you're coming up again and again about the question of kind of breaking the chains of the caste system, and what's needed in that regard. I think especially when considering, as you open with the Althusser's discussion of ISAs and RSAs, the way in which the state plays out ideologically, the violence entailed, but also, of course, in repressive force. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the relation of the caste system to the Indian state at present, and what that implies for political action and what's needed to really overcome the caste.
Yeah. So, any nation state is a repressive category. So, nation state is constituted by repressing a few internal others, and no nation state is an exception to that. The Indian nation state was the consensus of the elite upper class groups. That consensus was achieved in 1947. Right? Now, in the last 65, 67 years, the subaltern groups are challenging that consensus. And all the categories that emerged due to the nation-state project, majority, minority, secularism, communism, all these categories are a function of the nation-state project. Mm-hmm. So unless you challenge the minority category, the majority category will not destabilize. Unless you challenge the minority category, the secularism, communism will not be destabilized. So the Pasmanda movement sees the interrogation and destabilization of the minority category as a destabilization of the entire nation-state structure in conceptual terms. Unless that is done, the rights of the subaltern communities, the 85% of Indians, will never arrive in the political scene. And it is not only about caste. We have to rethink about the first part of the post-political system, right? So you see, I mean, a party gets 35% votes.
31.
No, I'm saying in Karnataka, in previous elections, Congress got 35% votes. BJP gets 34% vote, and BJP forms a government. Right? A party gets 30% votes, it has a majority, a brutal majority. Another party with just 3% of less vote share, it is nowhere in the scene. Right? So this first past the post system is very pro-elite. It is very upper caste. And unless we reinstall, unless we try to do away with it, and develop some kind of a proportional electoral system, so that the vote share of the party is represented in the assemblies, it is represented in the representative institutions. Our democracy will always remain an elite game. So subaltern will never arrive. And a number of other reforms, bureaucratic reforms, reforms in judiciary, reforms in media. I mean, media is absolutely underrepresented in India. Absolutely underrepresented. Judiciary is very underrepresented. The most representative institution in India is the legislature, where the vote counts, where the numbers count. But even then it is a problem. Even then it is a problem.
Thank you, sir. The first question would be a clarification of previous question. Your point of culturalization. You almost equated culturalization to the upward movement, Ashrafization or Sanskritization. I was not very clear on that, because are all foundational mythologies, are they all necessarily imitative of upper caste or upper class? Because many of the what you call the more not Manuvadi, what do they call, the foundational movements in the Mool Nivasi, their foundational mythologies are not on the lines of, let's say, an Aryan mythology. It predates that, right? So they try to find something else. You might find a similar form, but it's not, taking its inspiration from, let's say, an Aryan or a Brahmanical system. That's one thing. The second question is, you pointed to some figures which are very interesting, that even the so-called representative of the Dalits, the majority Dalits in India and especially in the state of UP, the BSP, the majority of the seats they give also among Muslims is to upper caste Muslims. So so where are the unities between, the Pasmanda Muslims and the other, let's say, Bahujans and Dalits happening? What is the dynamic there currently? Yeah.
On the first question, when I say culturalized, you are right. I see it as a shorthand for sensitization and Ashrafization. But obviously, those counter stories are also there. But the reason I would not include the Mool Nivasi movement within the culturalization, because they don't operate through the principle of caste. They operate through the principle of a larger Mool Nivasi identity, where the caste communities, they are transcended towards a larger Mool Nivasi identity, at least theoretically. Theoretically. Just like the Pasmanda. It wants to transcend the individual smaller identities into a larger Bahujan identity, right? Theoretically. As far as the empirical thing is concerned, we all know all these organizations are dominated by a few dominant players within the lower caste, and there is some work needs to be done on that so that the other voices could be included. Second question was regarding this unity of the Dalit Pishla Ek Saman Hindu Ho Ya Musliman, the unity that the Pasmanda are advocating. You see, there's always a gulf between the enactment of an identity and its sedimentation. Right? So, for example, the lower caste treaty started from Phule, but Mayawati could become a chief minister only in 1994. There's a huge gap. So, and I mean that I can answer this from the vantage point of two. One, the pragmatic. You've seen the Dalit Muslim unity thing in the recent UP elections, and what happened to BSP. Mm-hmm. Whether the Dalit Muslim unity thing benefited BSP or it benefited BJP. I was in Saharanpur, and this leader from BSP, what's his name, who was recently thrown out of the party. This No, Muslim. Nasibuddin Siddiqui, yes. Nasibuddin Siddiqui. I was in Saharanpur during the elections. Nasibuddin Siddiqui visited Saharanpur, and in one of his speeches, he said, now it's time, जब वो राज आएगा, जब दलित और मुसलमानों के पैर हिंदू धोएंगे. दलित और मुसलमानों के पैर हिंदू धोएंगे. If you come out with those kinds of speeches, it is always advantage BJP. And the Dalit Muslim solidarity, because of the Ashrafia discourse, it is not useful even for the Bahujans. That the Bahujans have to understand. The Bahujan unity has to be the unity of Bahujans across religions. You have to understand. Ashrafi are a class, Syrian Saraswat Christians are a class, the Jat and Khatri Sikhs are a class, and there could be a few good individuals here and there. But in politics, they will always act as a class. They will always preserve their class interests. We have to be very clear on that. That is why we are against Dalit Muslim solidarity. We are for Dalit Pasmanda unity. And I categorically wrote a piece in Hindi before the UP elections, exactly cautioning Mayawati ji about this, and that is what happened in the election.
You mean Dalit Muslim unity के बजाय
Dalit Pasmanda unity. Absolutely.
This is still not clear. Dalit Pasmanda meaning what do you want to refer to?
The unity of lower caste across regions.
So okay, Dalit and Pasmanda refers to each other. Like
Yes.
they are kind of juxtaposed with the same.
Bahujan unity, the broader Bahujan
Bahujan
unity.
from this side, Bahujan from
The
this side.
broader Bahujan unity.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
So
go ahead.
let's take final two questions or comments. Paul.
Or is it?
Sanjay.
Or you want to go first?
Just a quick question.
Okay.
Is there a similar movement in Pakistan?
No movement, but discussion has started. Movements are not there. In Nepal, the discussions have
I
started.
know some Pasmanda from Pakistan. That was it. Yes.
Yeah, since we were talking about the conversion, Baba Sahib's conversion to the Buddhism. So we know that when he was thinking of the conversion, at that time many religious heads approached him, including the Muslims and Christians. So he rejecting the converting to the Muslim. Is there this particular part, I mean, the casteism with, because his whole conversion was against the casteism in the Hindu system, right? So whether this particular part, that the casteism also exists in the Muslim community, played part in him rejecting the Muslim conversion to the Muslim?
Yes, and also he did not actually convert to Buddhism. He converted to Navayana Buddhism, which is his own interpretation of Buddhism from the vantage point of the marginalized. So it's an attempt at liberation theology. So even actually existing Buddhism is casteist, just like actually existing Islam, Hinduism, or any other religion. So that is important because Dr. Ambedkar actually reinvented the Buddhist tradition. He rethought the Buddhist tradition.
See these Navayana traces. Where do we get the actual traces of it? Bearing in Ambedkar's thought, because clearly in his speech that he gave, right, on the eve of Buddhism, he doesn't mention Navayana so explicitly.
Yeah, there's a controversy on that, whether the term Navayana Buddhism could be used or not. But my point is, let's not talk about the semantics.
Right.
Buddha and his Dhamma, what is that text? It's
Right.
not a usual text. It's a text where he reads Buddhist tradition from the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And those are the points he has stressed time and time again. Whether we call it Navayana or not, that is immaterial. I mean, that is in popular currency, so I'm using it as a shorthand. But I really don't know about the history.
Okay, Jesse wants to take the last call.
Another one?
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering, like, we've seen recently that there have been movements trying to bring the OBC or Bahujan movement together, but obviously there have been so many issues with that, within like the caste hierarchies within Bahujan. Do you see the similar things in Pasmanda Muslims?
Absolutely.
If that is there, then how would you put that forth with Pasmanda as a common entity?
We'll keep on trying. Just like the others keep on trying.
But you do see
Dr.
that.
Ambedkar's argument is caste is not a division of labor, it is a division of laborers.
Right.
That is what graded inequality does too. It's so complicated. It makes things so complex. I mean, even I was in Nagawa Sadat, so it's a basti of Sayyids, Shia Sayyids. There is a road in between, this small village. On one side, a few Sayyids live, on the other side also Sayyids. Now, these Sayyids don't intermarry, even within a village. Why? Because the other Sayyids are supposed to be martial, very violent, and these Sayyids are supposed to be very educated and liberal. So, that is how caste operates. It's so complex, it's so complicated, and no solidarity would be easy to achieve.
All that excellent news. Thank you very much, Khalid. As a ritual, we for every guest we offer a token of love. I would invite the president of Boston Study Group, Sanjay Vagat, to honor our speaker.
So, Professor Khalid, thank you very much for coming to Boston Study Group to deliver this lecture. I was knowing about the casteism within the Muslim community, but we were not knowing to these details. It was really insightful. So many new things we learned today about the issues there within this particular Muslim community as far as the casteism is concerned. So thank you, Paul, for getting you here, and really we enjoyed. I am a very vivid fan of the American football, and today I was missing the game, but after listening to you, I thought that it should go on. So that it was that effective. So I'm really thankful on behalf of the Boston Study Group for coming and delivering this beautiful lecture. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for being very patient and just like that.
So we will have a group photograph.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
With our,
With that epic background.
Why not?
I can put this down and I can get a good photograph.
yeah.
Auto one of you. So that everybody is in the picture.